Hello, hello, hello. This is Dr. Troy.
And I'm Ben-Jamin Toy.
We're broadcasting from the Cohesion Culture headquarters in beautiful Charleston, South Carolina, where even when it rains, the sun still shines.
You're going to hear real-time stories from leaders confessing their most crucial or recent uh-oh experiences in business.
Learn what their uh-oh cost them, steps they took to fix it, and how they planned
to not do that one again.
Hello, cohesive leaders. This is Trevor Crunelle. I'm here today with Dr. Troy Hall, and we are broadcasting our Uh-Oh Cohesive Leaders podcast. I'm a member of the Cohesive crew, have been privileged to work with Ben-Jamin and Dr. Troy for a couple of years now, helping them facilitate the different programs they have, all based around their cohesive leadership programs. Our guest today is Andrew Brümmer. Andrew, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me on the show. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely, Andrew. Where are you calling from today, Andrew?
I'm in Atlanta.
Atlanta, okay. And what is the name of your company?
My company is called the Ardunan Village.
Ardunan Village, okay.
Yep. Ardunan meaning house on the hill. So the intent is to be far-seeing, overarching place of warmth and welcome.
And what language is that?
That would come from Scotland.
Scotland, okay. Well, we always like to start off time we do anything in the cohesive programs with connections. We feel it's important to make connections with people before we do anything with content or get into that. So we're going to ask a few connections questions to help our audience get to know you better. So the first one is going to be, what is something that is not on your resume or not on your social media that you want to tell us about?
Gosh, I'm fairly open with a lot of stuff that I do. I think what is not on my resume is, I got up to, I think, bronze in ballroom dancing, and I've doubled for Robert Downey Jr., doing some stunt work for him in a good couple of years ago.
Oh, so you are light on your feet.
I know. I've been told I have twinkle toes. I am very light on my feet.
Well, the twinkle toes, I do so well I have two left feet. I don't know how that works.
That just means you get slid around the dance floor.
Yeah. Well, and actually my daughter claims that I have no rhythm at all, but I like to do finger dancing. So I'm like finger dancing in the moment. My daughter will say, "Dad, what are you doing?" I said, "I'm dancing." She says, "Stop it. You're embarrassing me." And I go, "Good. My work here is almost done."
I love it. I'm sure it's going to be sweet reprisal.
What kind of roles did you do double for?
It was a movie. It was Danger Zone. So it was filmed in South Africa, with Billy Zane and Robert Downey Jr. And I doubled for Robert Downey Jr. there.
Wow, that is really great. You're like we're like one connection away from Robert Downey Jr. You know that.
No, I wouldn't take it that way.
You know, like 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon. We're now 1 degree of Andrew. I mean, I don't know. It works out like that.
Oh yeah. Let's go with that one.
Oh my God. Well, Andrew, thanks for sharing that little bit, about you, something that, people wouldn't normally find or know. It's really great for you to let us know about that. So one of the things that we also want to get an idea of is the difference between who you are as a person versus are as a role. So the first question is to have you share with us, what would be words that people would use to describe you when you are out of the room? Now, you hope that they're going to say the same thing when you're in the room, but let's say that you leave the room. Here are some descriptive words that people would use about you. Not a role, not, oh, you're a dad, you're a coach, you're a good listener. Those are roles. But what are words that people would use to describe you? And they can be things like integrity, could be, any characteristic or attribute. But what would those words be? Yeah,
so I think caring, paying it forward, intense, no off button, super opinionated, rapid change.
Yeah, good. And then how have those characteristics worked in your favor?
The good comes with the bad. So intense can work against you as well as for you. So being intense, I'm always on, I'm always deliberate, I'm always present with people. but there is no off button. My kids often get to a point of saying, "Dad, just stop, just turn off." There is no off button. I don't have an off button. I would say there's a healthy. The caring is fantastic because it just innately is who I am. I care for people. At a personal level, professional level, I just try and do what I can to help wherever I can to work with people. So I think as with any really good thing, there's got to be some sort of catch to it that catches you at the worst of times or the best of times.
So when you think about that, realistically, your caring button is your off button. Because, right? Because if you were thinking about it, if somebody said, "Look, it's too much. You're too intense. Like, I need a break," then if you care, then you'd exercise your caring attribute, and then you'd be off for a moment.
Yeah, a nano moment, but yes, I'd go off.
Oh my goodness. Well, I know Trevor and I would then now want to know about your roles. Okay, now we know a little bit about that descriptive words. What are the roles that you play?
So the roles I play are multiple. I play that of a fractional executive, as an interim executive. I play it as a coach, a mentor. I do mentoring around the world, so from Iraq to Botswana, Nigeria, Venezuela, Bulgaria, Australia, India, USA, just all over the place. I also work with startups, so I'm a paid for type person at every level that I'm able to get into. And then I am a dad, a husband. I cause as much trouble as I can humanly possibly do to try and keep the creative juices flowing with the kids and the wife and all the significant people in my life, and help wherever I can. I'm kind of a pillar or a wall that the family leans on, or I lean in to try and help situations wherever possible.
Well, I wanted to ask you about the mentoring. So when and just to gain clarity, oftentimes people use mentoring in place of coaching. And so coaching and mentoring to me have two different aspects because you come at it a little differently. I see mentoring as helping a person through their career, through their job, and I consider coaching more on them personally developing who they are as a person, not necessarily trying to get them another job. Obviously, that can help relate. So, how does the mentoring work for you?
I would, depending on the person that engages with me, the topic they open up. Sometimes I have a mentor that'll switch into a coaching role, and sometimes a coaching that'll switch into a mentoring role. And it's about understanding that person, hearing the words they are, being very present with them, being deliberate with them, and making sure you're leaning in and helping them in the spaces that they are calling for, either directly or indirectly, for help or assistance in the words they're using. So I will navigate between the two of them depending on the situation and the person and where they're at to try and maximize the time spent with them.
Really nice the way you talked about moving from coaching to mentoring, mentoring to coaching, but to kind of, it seems like we're in alignment with our definitions and the way we would use them. So folks who are listening to this would understand that, when we talk about get a mentor, that mentor is going to help them maybe get that career that they're looking for instead of the job they have. And coaching can help them think about their personal skills, who they are as a person when they show up, just like you described yourself before you started talking about your roles. So,
and you as the mentor or the coach, you need to be aware of that person and what they're actually reaching out for. And then when you recognize that the thing they're asking for assistance on, there may be other things that are blocking them, and you need to smartly transition without creating any sort of holes in their life, for the lack of a better word, but being very human, very deliberate around what you do with that person at that point in time, because you just don't know how they've arrived at where they've arrived.
Great. Thank you for sharing that. Now, I have talked entirely too much with my questions. I know that Trevor is very excited about getting us with the first question that really kicks off our Uh-Oh program.
So your Uh-Oh experience. We want to hear about, something that you, a mistake, a misstep that you had in your career, and then how you overcame that, what you learned from it.
Yeah, so I have a few. The first is I'm a servant pleaser, and as a leader, as being a servant pleaser, you can quickly lose track of yourself, of your brand, of identity, and you can become very monologue to pay. You can become very very invisible to what you should be looking after. And it's great to serve and look after other people, but you got to keep in mind that you have to look after self. I've always put other people in front of me, and that caused significant career damage in terms of market awareness, market brand, being out there and being able to do things. A real transactional challenge that I had in leadership, in the leadership function, so actual leading and working with a team. I created a really, really rich autonomous team in one of the companies I just worked with. The team that reported to me were just turnkey, just absolute, kind of an idealistic, just a phenomenal group of people who just got stuff done. I could go away for a week or 2 weeks, and I would maybe receive 1 or 2 phone calls, and I'd come back, and I didn't have to deal with issues in the inbox and that. In that journey of creating that team, almost created the golden children syndrome, where there were some people who almost, because of the energy and the culture that they created around themselves, they created a them and us. It created, not they, it created a them and us situation. And trying to boil that down into the balance of the team was really, really difficult. What ended up happening is I ended up alienating one section of the organization where I was picked as the kind of the company enemy for them, and somewhere that they needed to vent out. And then I decided to, address that, and invited them into a room. There were 17 of them. I invited them into the room, and we had some really tough discussions and covering things that they, legacy built up energies. But that would be the one of the big mistakes in the actual leadership function, not me getting to leadership, and then just taking the bull by the horns and saying, I need to fix this problem.
So tell me a little bit about the alienation. So what was it that that really contributed the most to you alienating the one section of the group?
It was the leadership style, where there were some parts of the organization that operated in command and control, and I don't operate in a command and control function. I operate with absolute autonomy, so pushing autonomy and decision making out to the floor. So I had a team of people who were executing without the need to have me involved or be in the room in their decisioning. They were very involved in the other team, and the other team needed their executive structure to be helping them decide on what they were doing and why they were doing what they were doing. That team was, in the interim, resentful to the organization because of the perceived nature that they were managed differently from the balance of the organization. So I wouldn't say there was something that was innately done as a mistake. It's more of a management methodology that when you create autonomous teams, you must recognize that you are creating a structure which will eventually become a very strong structure, very, very strong, very loyal, very passionate, very dedicated structure. And you have to be mindful of the teams around them that do not have the same level of management coaching, leadership coaching, development that's on the go. And that in itself creates a problem, because you create a perceived them and us. You create a that team is involved, or that team's doing it, so and they're deciding by themselves, they're executing by themselves. So it's being aware that there are other management styles involved in an organization, and by creating one particular type that is in complete contrast to the other, you can create unexpected energies that you have to confront.
And so then for you, relating it to you personally, because, part of the real magic of this podcast is that we help others, really mentor through mishaps and mistakes, things of that nature. So how did this, like, what was it that had you figure out, wow, I may have inadvertently alienated this group? What
So
were the tell signs for you?
Yeah, good. So I managed, in the way I created the structure in my team. I had people. There's all statements: if you can't get close to someone, then find out who is close to them and figure out how you build the relationship with the person that is close to the person you're trying to impact or affect. So I've coached my team to figure out how do they, if they cannot affect one person or one particular group of people, who are the people that are their trusted advisors? Where do they go to? So I had a team that my team started developing relationships with the other teams. And it started coming out that the other teams were incredibly angry and annoyed and frustrated with the organization. And so it was through happenstance in terms of gluing events together, where I was soliciting information, soliciting insights, and attempting to engage with the team members of that team, where it was falling on deaf ears. So I was taking the insights and the learnings and trying to help the team kind of open its eyes. And the old statements of leadership is people will only be led that want to be led. You can't just lead people. You can manage people, but you can't lead people. People have to want to be led, and you have to create that energy inside them that helps them want to be led. So I got to the point that in trying to address the situations directly, in terms of trying to solicit and leverage my team to create the relationships, to create the energy, to do the training, to offer up the training sessions, the visibility, it was clear that the animosity was ingrained deeply within the team, and trying to dance around it with doing the right thing and saying the right words, etc., was just not going to cut it. It was not going to solve the problem.
So how did you take account? Oh, and that's great that you have your little puppies in the background.
Just hold on to me.
Yeah. So how did you take accountability for the
Yeah. So what I did there is I arranged a session with all of that entire team. So there were 17 people in the room that I went to go work with. And I walked into the room with myself and the 17 of them working and just started working the problem and started throwing out and allowing. As a leader, I made myself incredibly vulnerable. I created a lot of space for them to throw challenges and questions at me. It was very, very insightful. There's a lot of passion, a lot of emotion involved. But as a leader, I created the situation, and my intent was to allow the anger to surface and the anger to come out, the frustration, the venom, to allow it to be spoken. Because once something is spoken, you get away from, because there's so many things going on in organizations you can't touch. You have someone who finds out about it, but they can't tell you and say, well, don't say anything because you can't know about it. So, can't ruin my relationships. So my goal at that point was to get things out in the air so that they could be touched. And I'm a firm believer that if you can touch something, the virtual touch of a problem within a team that something's going on, if I can touch it, then I can address it. Then it's no longer now it's not the silent or ghost elephant in the room. I see the elephant, and I walk up and I can actually start doing something with the elephant. And I no longer have to worry about somebody getting me information that I can't action, because if I action it, it's clear where that source comes from. And all I would have done was made the situation larger than it needed to be, or larger than it was. So my goal in that session was to create moments where the topics and the anger and the frustration were visible, were heard, were felt, were experienced. There was a lot of emotion. There was a lot of passion involved in the discussion. It was very clear in the same moments of that, it was clear to see that there was misalignment or versions of information that the team were having that were not all the truths. And that was also a great opportunity to put all the truths there. And then in putting the truths out there, finding those people who avoided the affirmation of those truths, being able to recognize where some of the toxicity and the venom was being created. So it was very insightful, very difficult, very, very hurtful window of time in life. But I don't know that we could have solved it. And one of the persons that were in that meeting that was the most vocal, the most angry, the most passionate, the most energetic, happened to be one of the team members who turned out to be the most loyal post that journey, the most engaged, and the most company focused in getting the job done. So it's, I often say you just don't know what you don't know. You don't know what you're going to say that's going to affect people's lives. But it was a tough ride. It was a really tough journey. It was a tough journey to get there. And it was tough for a year after that, every month having follow-up sessions where you're allowing the team to vent their anger and frustration. Now, I will say that it did get to the point 6-7 months down the line that they were repeating the same message from out of different mouths. So it became very clear to me that their messaging wasn't about resolving organizational conflicts and dynamics. It was about perpetuating states of belief. And then we fall into another topic where people end up in a, because of life, because of decisions, because of leadership styles, because of personalities, because of country and organizational politics, and just everything. You end up in what we allow ourselves to be as a victim of what has transpired, and we don't allow ourselves to move forward from the situation that hurt us or made us angry. And that energy almost becomes our identity. So it became clear that started surfacing about 6 or 7 months in. And then I had to solve a different problem, because then I realized the problem isn't about fixing the ills or the wrongs that team felt. There were other dynamics that needed to be addressed there.
So I definitely think that we should be pursuing. I really think you hit on something when you talked about the repeating of the information, and it wasn't about getting things resolved, but it was about perpetuating the conversation, because it could be the area where they felt comfortable in. So, it's like, I don't want to be autonomous. I want something else. And so I can keep talking about it. So I want to come to that, but I want to give Trevor an opportunity to see if he has a question, because I keep jumping in.
Well, Mike, the thing I was wanting to ask about is along those same lines, Dr. Choi, is you use the phrase, Andrew, becoming a victim of what's transpired. And so how would you relate that to an emerging leader? So if one of your team members there, how can they overcome something if they're in that situation?
I think as a leader, you have, because that over there is one of the biggest challenges. We all have team members that we do something wrong to, or we say something wrong, or we lead them wrong, or we react to them incorrectly, and then they feel bruised. I mean, that's just a day in the life of leadership, right? And we're not perfect, and we all get it wrong. Toxicity in a team is something we kind of indulge until it's almost, and I'll take the word almost, until it is usually too late. And we allow toxicity to exist in a team, which creates a lot of fracturing in that team. The team loses its organizational purpose. It remains very loyal to the emotive bond inside the team. But that team's identity is based around the perceived wrongdoing, or that person that is able to yield the toxins in an effective way that garnishes loyalty, supports, camaraderie, alignment, common belief, common experience. Whether they experience it or not is irrelevant, but they have a belief that they experienced it. They have just an absolute physical sensation that they've experienced what that other person experienced. And the key in identifying this is super important, to be able to realize that there are people, especially where in this scenario, in a toxic environment, that are very unhealthy for the team and for the company, and they're creating intentional division and intentional misalignment. And as soon as you picked up that you've got that common message, that what that signals is you've got people who have got something else that they're dealing with, something else that they're trying to accomplish, because they're not wanting to have the next level of constructive discussion. So if you have gone through the anger and you've gone through the emotional vetting, and you have picked someone to vent that against, and you feel like I've touched someone that is at fault and the reason for me being like this, and there has been corrective actions to address those things, to be able to make sure that the motivation for why that existed has now subsided, and then you've addressed the problems, addressed the major issues that are causing it. For that same cycle of discussions to come up, that speaks to you got to get down to who is actually creating that energy in the team, and what is the end outcome that's actually desired. What is the end state outcome? Because if you go through, let's say there's 10 problems that are raised, and you fix 8 of them, and 2 of them remain persistent, and then the 3rd one comes back, and the 4th one comes back, and the 5th one comes back, not because anything is reverted in the organization, but now that resolving of the problem, the fixing of things now is no longer relevant, and the problem is now, that historical view experience of the problem is now front and center. So you've got to figure out how do you address this? How do you find where it's coming from, and how do you then manage that out of the organization? Because if you've got someone that you're fixing the problems with, and they're not willing to move forward in constructive dialogue or in dialogue, any dialogue, even angry dialogue, if they're not willing to kind of look in the mirror and find a new version of tomorrow for themselves, then you have to question whether they will, and you have to then have an introspection into the organizational impact that person or those people are having.
Which is really great, like focusing in on what you as the individual, like you have a certain level of responsibility to be a part of the solution, not
Absolutely.
just a person who is going to broadcast the problem.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. And if somebody's perpetually broadcasting the problem, then you as a leader have to address that in different ways.
Exactly. So I'm very curious to know about the individual who was very vocal, about information, but then created a transformative sort of mindset to then become the most loyal. I know you can't speak for necessarily what that person was thinking, but what were the actions that you observed where we already know, like, okay, I am adamant about this. I might be a little angry in my communication. Maybe I'm a little standoffish in my communication. So you can kind of get a sense that there's this tension, right? But what are the behaviors that you recognized that then led you to believe that this person was now loyal?
So self-critical thinking, emotional self-awareness on the discussions they were having. There was a lot of energy release from that person with other team members, where the person was saying, if person A has said this and done that, and person B is telling me that person A didn't do that, and I've always believed person A to be true, and now person B is contradicting, and now I have the evidence, or I have the facts. Now I can now start asking critical thinking. I can now, in my own mind, start saying, what's actually going on here? What am I actually being told? What is actually happening around me? And watching that person transform through the dialogues they were having, they changed their work social circle around them, and they started engaging much more on the constructive, trying to find answers, and that resulted in that person being invited into the room in sessions that person wasn't previously invited into. So you could actually draw that person in. So it wasn't like that person went through a miraculous change and, overnight or over 3 months solved the problem, but they followed, what Stephen Covey says in the Your Trusted Advisor of small steps. That person conducted a few small steps, and then the organization did a few more small steps, and then the team did a few more small steps, and then that person did a few more small steps, and eventually we got that person to be the point that that person's voice was well respected, appreciated, and wanted in the room. And that I've not spoken with that person about this in terms of that transformational journey, but that actualization has to be something. There's got to be something in that allows the person to look in the mirror and say, I'm now owning. It's like when we listen to the news, you can decide to go do homework, or you can get wrapped up in the emotion of what you just heard. And I think that person decided to do their own homework and their own thinking, and applied their own mind to what was going on around them.
Yeah, because what you're describing is very common in organizations when people have their sense of safety or their personal security or their psychological needs not being met. And if they feed that information with the negativity that's around them, and if they don't find the truth, if they don't seek out what might be true, and only accept one side of a story, then they become very lopsided, not only in who they are really as a person, because it shows up everywhere. It's not just it's not like you're just one thing at work and then you're one thing at home. That your person follows you socially and professionally.
Exactly.
So I think that what you have said, which is really good for people listening who said, I might need a mindset shift, what will that be? And that mindset shift is make sure you are grounded and you understand the truth. Doesn't matter who's speaking it, but make sure you're really clear on the truth. And also, you need to think about how do you become part of the solution to the problem, and not just a person who's going to continue to broadcast or tell you that that is the problem, because
Yeah.
it's not helpful to anyone in that situation.
Yeah, and the simple method is if you have 5 people in a team and one person is incredibly toxic and creating dissension and downfall and animosity and all that, the amount of energy that person, if you're a passionate person and you're an emotive person, the amount of energy that you vest into that discussion is phenomenal. The amount of sleepless nights you have and the anger that gets built up in you is astounding. I mean, you don't realize it, but the amount of energy that is built up in you, and the opposite, solving that problem is just reverting to critical thinking and asking questions and saying, hey, I don't quite understand. Things are not lining up. This and this and this was done. This is what I understand, and this doesn't make sense. This contravenes what I understand, the subculture or the culture or the method or the approach or the instructions that have been given. Can you help me clarify? I don't care whether that's culturally related, whether it's somebody in their personal identity, whether it's a product that's being built, whether it's CEO priorities, whether it's project management or project priorities. The same is true. If you're in a situation where you have energy that's being built up around you because of continuing changing scope or continuing priority changes or, elongated periods of time to onboard somebody for a critical role, and you're working through the weekends, and if things are not congruent, ask questions. Don't sit there and just absorb and allow yourself to negatively build up. Because to go ask the question is simple. It takes 5 minutes, 10, 15 minutes of your time. Go in with a constructive discussion, ask the constructive question, and inform yourself. And by doing that, you eliminate, if you measure time on how long these things impact you, it takes a week, 2-3 weeks for a story to hit the grapevine, another 3-4 weeks for energy to build up, another 5-6 weeks for people to get angry. And then it takes 9 weeks of executives and managers to get involved to squash it. And you're like, I understand how this takes so much energy. It's just a case of stopping, saying things are incongruent, and then figuring out who do you have the discussion with. And if you don't know how to get to that person, find out who that person talks with and find out who that person's talked with. And eventually you'll find a pathway and say, I need to go have this message with Andrew. Who can I speak with that can help me get that message done? It's slowly progressing through that journey, but it takes that individual. And then on the other side, it takes the leadership structure to make sure that that level of critical thinking is welcomed. And when people ask fundamental questions where things are not congruent, that there isn't a backhand that goes back at that person. So I'm absolutely not absolving leadership in this discussion. It's a complete two-way street. But things like this can be resolved, and it doesn't have to be an entire organization that is co-aligned. You can have entities that are working towards a greater solution, and just know that the organization and the people involved. Sunlight's a beautiful disinfectant, and where logic prevails, can prevail. It will prevail. You just have to demonstrate to people that it can and will.
Yeah, that's good. So one of the questions that we like to always make sure that we address, because I think you've helped us see this situation, how to get through it, which has been really great. What did it cost you personally?
Sure. As someone who cared and has to that point had done everything I could humanly do for the organization, for the teams, for the individuals, when I heard that I was the person that they were rallying against and they hated, and some very explicit words were used. Being someone who cares about people, it struck really, really hard. I could not understand why the one person in the organization who was doing everything humanly possible to help the people find a fair, caring, loving workspace that was healthy and safe. I couldn't understand why they had chosen me, given I actually hadn't all of the seeds, the core foundations of the challenges that they were angry with. I wasn't part of the genesis of any of that. It really hurt. It was a tough window. It was really, really, really tough. There were some very dark days in that window. And when I went in to that session, I did not expect the volume and the veracity of the anger to come out that did come out. It was eye-opening. And since then, when you've gone through one of those experiences, you understand what can come out of the next. But I had no idea what was coming. And I couldn't understand why, going into the session, why I was that one person that they had decided to vent their anger and hate on.
Wow. Well, really, we do appreciate so much you sharing that story with us and really giving us a glimpse into something very personal for you, but yet very rewarding in the end. It's sometimes hard when you're going through something. I don't like to be the Pollyanna person who's going to tell you every story is going to have a silver lining. I'm very optimistic, but I know that people need to work through that. And sometimes in that situation that may look like, wow, why me? There's always this opportunity that says, why not me? Because then I get an opportunity. It's like when people question my integrity, I like take it as a compliment. I go, yeah, question my integrity. Ask me whatever questions you want because I know my answers are going to be solid. And guess what that does? It establishes a better relationship with that individual in the long run because they've had a chance to, put out whatever it is that they wanted to say, get that out in the open, and then we can kind of resolve it. So
Not
Andrew,
only that person,
yeah.
but those people, because that discussion, because there were 17 people, it became very public, became very,
Yes.
very known about. And with 120 people in the company, and I had that discussion with 17 people, it didn't take long before there were some other groups that became part of that discussion, that follow-on monthly session for the months to come. And at first there was alignment between the groups. And then over time, it became clear that the various groups were saying, I don't understand why that group can't just move on. So it became very visible that what it did, one, it built a lot of trust with me and my team. When they saw the extent to which I was willing to take things on in the interest of the company, because it was the right thing to do, I earned a lot of credibility with that team, a lot of trust, an awful lot. I mean, words can't convey what was learned and earned through that cycle. What also became apparent is there were other teams who were kind of drawn into the toxicity, who through that event and those sessions, it became clear to them that not all things are equal. And it became, without me, what was beautiful about it is that I didn't need to touch the persons that were creating the toxicity. By them being so vocal about it, and with me and the organization and the leadership and the CEO team doing everything we could to resolve, those people that were creating the toxicity named themselves. I didn't have to name them.
Yeah, great. Well, Andrew, we really do appreciate you sharing all of that information. It was really great. So when folks are listening and they'd like to reach out and get a hold of you, how do they do that?
Yeah, so easy. I'm on LinkedIn, Andrew Brümmer, and I have the website andrewbrummer.com, and there's a contact form at the bottom there. As you land, you'll find my 2 books that I've written, one around leadership, leading magnanimously, and the other around networking and why you at any stage of life should not get comfortable, but you should be looking after your brand and your network and the relationships that you build around you so that you have people around you to support you outside of your immediate work environment.
So that's Andrew Brümmer, BRUMMER.com.
That is correct.
Okay, great. Now, one thing we always like to know is, I know you prepped for our episode today. What is a question that you thought Trevor and I, or you might have thought Ben, since you thought he might be here, what was a question you thought one of us would ask you that we didn't?
Gosh, you threw me in a curveball when you started asking intense questions when we got into it. So I've been through quite the journey of business, and I was thinking you were going to ask me very much around what was the motivation on that chaotic journey I've taken, and at what point I should have changed direction into leadership more aggressively sooner, and not why did it take me so long to get to where I was.
All right, so let's just assume we have another minute.
That's
So
not fair.
so how would you answer the question?
Yeah, I wish I could go back and play it over again. I think I woke up, I got very comfortable in life. I got very comfortable with people I surrounded myself in. I got very complacent. and I was enjoying what I was doing. And I just have a bunch of excuses and no reasons. I think I should have woken up earlier. I should have opened my eyes earlier in life. And I should have been more, while I have no regret in creating the platforms I did for the people that I've worked with, I should have created a co-platform for myself. And I did not.
It's great. Great for you to know that, because it really helps then say, how am I not going to do that again? And yeah, so that's really, oh my gosh. So yeah. Okay, Andrew, it has been a pleasure. We thank you. And just like we end all of our Cohesion Culture programs with this very simple mantra, you don't have to know everything.
You just need to be teachable.